Raymond Burr was one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. From his commanding presence as Perry Mason to his cold, calculating villain roles in films, he built a career that seemed flawless. But behind that image was a man who spent decades weaving stories to hide who he really was. Burr wasn't just an actor, he was also a master storyteller when it came to his own life. And for years, no one dared to question him. In the mid-20th century, Hollywood was a place where image was everything. Studios controlled what the public saw, and actors who didn't fit into the mold often faced career-ending scandals. For someone like Burr, who quietly lived as a gay man, being himself wasn't an option. Instead, he created a narrative so convincing that most people believed it without hesitation. One of the most striking parts of the self-created biography was a claim that he had been married twice, and that he'd even lost a child. Burr told interviewers that his first wife tragically died of cancer, and that he later married an actress named Isabella Ward. According to his version of events, they had a son, Michael, who died of leukemia at just 10 years old. It was heartbreaking, moving, and believable. The press sympathized, and audiences saw Burr as a man shaped by personal tragedy. But here's the truth: none of it was real. Records showed that while Burr did briefly marry Ward in 1948, they divorced within a year, and there was never a child. The supposed son, Michael, never existed. Neither did the tragic first wife. It was all a fabrication, carefully designed to paint Burr as a widower, a man broken by loss, someone audiences could feel compassion for. Why go to such lengths? The answer lies in the climate of the time. In the 1950s and 60s, being gay in Hollywood wasn't just taboo, it was career suicide. Studios dropped actors at the slightest hint of scandal, and the public was quick to judge. Burr, who was on the cusp of becoming a household name, knew the risks all too well. So he built a shield, a fake backstory so detailed that it gave him the privacy to live as he wished behind the scenes. This wasn't just about keeping his career alive. It was about survival in an industry and society that left little room for honesty. What's fascinating is how flawlessly he maintained the illusion. Even close colleagues often didn't question his stories. He would talk about his son with deep emotion, as though the pain were fresh and people believed him. It was the perfect cover. But beneath this carefully constructed life was a secret that only a few close friends, and later Barbara Hale, would come to understand. Burr wasn't just hiding details for the sake of drama. He was hiding his truth, waiting for a world that might one day be ready to accept him. And yet, even with his shield in place, the cracks in Burr's story would eventually show. And the truth behind his private life would turn out to be even more fascinating than the stories he invented. Behind Raymond Burr's carefully constructed public life, there was someone who quietly stood by his side for decades: Robert Benavides. If Burr's fictional son and tragic marriages were designed to mislead the press, Benavides was a true constant in his world, the one piece of his life that wasn't an invention. Benavides wasn't just a companion. He was Burr's partner in every sense of the word. The two met in the early 1960s, right at the height of Perry Mason's success. At the time, Benavides was a young actor, but he soon gave up the idea of chasing the spotlight. Instead, he worked with Burr behind the scenes, managing business projects, co-owning a vineyard, and quietly building a life with a man the world believed to be a straight Hollywood widower. For more than 3 decades, their relationship endured, though it had to remain in the shadows. Unlike today, when celebrities can openly discuss their partners, Burr and Benavides had to cloak their love in secrecy. Hollywood was still a place of harsh judgment, and one public slip could have destroyed everything Burr worked for. The tragic irony was that fans thought they knew him because of Perry Mason's clean-cut, morally upright persona. In reality, the man who played Mason was living a truth far different from the one he showed to the world. Still, Burr and Benavides managed to create a partnership that was both stable and meaningful. They built a home together in Sonoma County, where they ran a vineyard that still carries Burr's name today. It wasn't just a side project. It was a passion they both poured their energy into. And unlike the fictional backstories Burr invented for press, The vineyard and Benavides's place in his life were real, tangible, and lasting. What made their bond even stronger was how seamlessly Benavides became part of Burr's day-to-day existence. He wasn't hidden away or treated like a dirty secret. Within Burr's circle of trusted friends, including Barbara Hale, Benavides was known, respected, and loved. It was a quiet acknowledgement of something that could never be shouted from the rooftops, but it mattered deeply to Burr to at least have acceptance from those closest to him. For Burr, the relationship was more than just companionship. It was stability in an industry built on instability. Hollywood was filled with fleeting fame, public scrutiny, and backstabbing deals. But with Benavides, he had someone who kept his feet on the ground, someone who understood the pressures, the double life, and the sacrifices Burr had to make. Even after Burr's passing in 1993, Benavides continued to honor their bond. He preserved the vineyard, protected Burr's legacy, and remained fiercely private about their relationship until much later, when it became more widely acknowledged. Unlike Burr's fabricated stories about wives and children, this was one truth that could no longer be erased. The quiet devotion between Burr and Benavides spoke volumes about how much the actor valued authenticity behind closed doors, even while projecting a carefully edited image to the world. And yet, while this love story was at the core of his life, there were other relationships, some rumored, some confirmed, that painted a more complex picture of Burr's hidden world. While Robert Benavides was Raymond Burr's anchor, there were plenty of whispers around Hollywood suggesting that Burr's private life was much bigger than the single relationship he allowed to be seen in his inner circle. In an industry where rumors spread faster than movie scripts, Burr's name often surfaced in conversations about secret romances with other men. And while few dared to speak openly in those years, the stories built a reputation for Burr as one of Hollywood's most carefully guarded open secrets. Back in 1950s and 1960s, being gay in Hollywood wasn't just career-ending. It was dangerous. Studios spent millions constructing the images of their stars, and homosexuality was seen as the ultimate scandal. That's why stars like Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, and Anthony Perkins were pushed into fake relationships or marriages with women. Burr took an even bolder approach. He invented an entire fictional family, complete with a dead wife and a son who tragically passed away, to keep journalists at bay. But even with those layers of misdirection, people still talked. Behind closed doors, Burr was known to attend gatherings where Hollywood's gay actors could relax without fear of exposure. These weren't wild parties, at least not always, but safe havens where men who were forced to live double lives could simply be themselves. It was in those circles, according to whispers, that Burr formed connections with other actors whose names were equally protected by studio lies. Some of the rumors linked him to younger actors looking for mentorship, others to contemporaries who understood the same burden of secrecy. Was it all true? Not every detail can be verified, of course, but Hollywood insiders at the time said that Burr's kindness and generosity made him both protector and a confidant for men who felt trapped by their own false public images. The term open secret often gets thrown around casually, but in Burr's case it truly applied. Industry insiders, writers, producers, co-stars often knew the truth but looked the other way. Why? Because Burr was too valuable to risk exposing. Perry Mason wasn't just a TV show, it was a cultural institution. Burr himself became synonymous with the character, embodying a moral compass viewers trusted. To reveal his private life would have shattered that illusion, and Hollywood simply wasn't ready for that kind of honesty. Still, some of Burr's co-stars, Barbara Hale among them, were well aware of what was happening behind the curtain. They chose to stay quiet, not out of shame, but out of loyalty. Hale, in particular, became one of his fiercest offenders, later refusing to indulge any rumors and instead highlighting Burr's generosity, his intelligence, and his quiet strength. To her, and to others who loved him, Burr's private relationships were his business, not the world's. Even so, the stories of his rumored romances, some whispered, some more confidently claimed, only added to his mystique. Fans thought they knew him because of Perry Mason, but behind the camera, Burr was living a life full of complexities careful strategies, and quiet rebellions against a system that forced men like him into silence. And as the years went on, the contrast between his public lies and his private truth only grew sharper, especially when compared to the equally secretive lives of other major stars of his era. Raymond Burr's private life wasn't an isolated case. It was a mirror of an entire Hollywood system built on carefully crafted illusions. If one actor was forced to live a double life, you could be sure there were dozens more doing the exact same thing. Burr's secrecy wasn't unique, but his ability to maintain it for so long made him stand out as one of the most successful guardians of his private world. In the 1940s through the 1960s, Hollywood was essentially a fortress of images. Studios like Warner Brothers, MGM, and Universal didn't just make films. They manufactured stars. Publicists crafted backstories, shaped personalities, and planted stories in newspapers. Every actor was expected to project a version of the ideal American, and that meant heterosexual, clean-cut, and scandal-free. For men who were gay, like Burr, survival meant choosing between playing along or risking complete career collapse. Take Rock Hudson, for example. He was perhaps the most famous leading man forced into the closet, living under constant pressure to maintain a straight facade. Tab Hunter was another. His career nearly ended when rumors about his relationships leaked to the press. Even Anthony Perkins, the brilliant star of Psycho, carefully balanced his private life against Hollywood's expectations. Burr was simply one more soldier in that hidden war. Only he went further than most by fabricating an entire tragic family to throw off suspicion. What made Burr different was how effectively he controlled the narrative. While Hudson's sexuality was always bubbling beneath the surface of gossip columns, Burr's invented backstory of widows and lost children seemed to shield him from harsher scrutiny. His fans believed the tragedy, sympathized with him, and saw him as a man who had suffered deeply. In reality, the lie was his armor, protecting not just his career, but also the man he truly loved, Robert Benavides. Barbara Hale, his Perry Mason co-star and lifelong friend, understood this better than anyone. In later years, she admitted that Burr's secrets were never shocking to those closest to him. She, like others, accepted it as part of the unspoken code of Hollywood. You didn't out someone, you didn't betray trust, because everyone had something to hide. Hale's silence wasn't complicit. It was protective. In her eyes, Burr wasn't living a lie. He was navigating a rigged game that gave him no other choice. Hollywood itself reinforced this system of silence. Agents, producers, and studio executives were all invested in keeping their stars marketable. They knew who was gay and who wasn't, but they treated it as a business secret rather than a personal truth. If someone slipped up, they weren't just risking themselves. They risked the money and image of an entire studio machine. That's why men like Burr carried so much pressure. One wrong step could bring everything crashing down. In many ways, Burr's secrecy became symbolic of Hollywood itself, a glittering surface hiding endless shadows. For audiences, Perry Mason was the upright defender of justice. For Burr, playing that role meant hiding from his own. And that contrast between the hero he portrayed and the truth he lived was a story repeated again and again across the industry. And yet, Burr wasn't just a victim of the system. He was also a survivor who learned how to outsmart it, protecting the people he loved while still becoming a household name. The question, though, was how long could man keep living that double life without the weight of it breaking him? When Barbara Hale finally broke her silence about Raymond Burr's private life, it wasn't in the form of shocking revelations or scandalous tell-alls. Instead, it was in quiet reflections that revealed both her loyalty and her deep respect for the man she worked alongside for decades. To Hale, Burr wasn't just a co-star. He was family. Their bond went far beyond Perry Mason. She saw firsthand the battles he fought behind the scenes, the loneliness that came with secrets, and the courage it took to maintain dignity in an industry that thrived on exposure. Hale was often asked later in her life if she knew the truth about Burr. Her answer was always simple. Of course she did. But in her eyes, Burr's personal life wasn't anyone else's business. She believed he deserved privacy, and she refused to reduce his legacy to rumors or tabloid fodder. Instead, she spoke about his kindness, his wit, and his generosity. Burr wasn't just a Hollywood star. He was a man who cared deeply about people, whether it was his colleagues on set or the countless charities he quietly supported. What makes Hale's perspective so important is that she wasn't just protecting Burr. She was also reframing his story. While gossip magazines wanted to paint him as a man hiding in shame, Hale emphasized that his secrecy wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Burr wasn't afraid of who he was. He was afraid of losing the career that allowed him to take care of the people he loved. Hale's words turned the narrative from one of hiding to one of resilience. In interviews, she would often mention how deeply Burr loved Robert Benavides, his partner of more than 30 years. She called a relationship built on respect, companionship, and unwavering loyalty. Hale admired how Burr shielded Benavides from public intrusion, even if it meant creating elaborate stories about his own life. To her, that wasn't deception, it was devotion. She wanted people to understand that behind the veil of Hollywood, Burr was living his truth in the only way the world at that time would allow. Hale also defended Burr against the harsh whispers that sometimes followed him, especially in the years after his death when more details about his secret life emerged. She argued that focusing only on the secrecy was unfair because it ignored the larger picture. Burr was an actor of immense talent who broke barriers in television, carried an iconic show for nearly a decade, and gave audiences a hero they could believe in. He should be remembered for the way he lit up the screen, not just for the lies he had to tell to survive. Barbara Hale's decision to speak wasn't about exposing Burr. It was about preserving him. By sharing her perspective, she made sure fans understood that Burr wasn't a tragic figure defined by secrecy. Instead, he was a man who carved out joy and love in spite of impossible circumstances. Hale wanted people to see him as she did, not as a man hiding in the shadows, but as someone who lived a full, rich, and meaningful life even when the odds were stacked against him. Her loyalty was unwavering, and in defending Burr, she wasn't just telling his story, she was rewriting it. Behind all the secrecy, fabricated stories, and carefully constructed public image, Raymond Burr found something that many people in Hollywood never had: true love. His relationship with Robert Benavides, though kept out of the spotlight, was a cornerstone of his private life. While the studios pushed Burr to invent tragic tales of dead wives and lost children, his real source of happiness was standing quietly by his side. Burr and Benavides met in the early 1960s, during the height of Burr's fame on Perry Mason. At that time, Benavides was an actor himself, though he would later transition into producing and managing Burr's career. From the beginning, theirs was a relationship marked not by scandal but by stability. Friends close to the couple described them as deeply devoted, sharing a home, passions, and even business ventures. They eventually established a vineyard together in California, a retreat that gave them peace away from Hollywood's prying eyes. Barbara Hale often spoke of Benavides with the same warmth she used when talking about Burr. To her, the two were inseparable, a team that leaned on each other through the most demanding parts of fame. Benavides wasn't just Burr's partner in love. He was his confidant manager and lifelong companion. Even though the public never knew the full truth, while Burr was alive, those within his circle saw a man who had found happiness, even if he had to keep it hidden from the rest of the world. Their love story is all the more remarkable considering the time they lived in. The 1960s and 1970s were not eras of acceptance. For a television star of Burr's magnitude, being open about a same-gender relationship could have ended his career overnight. The stakes were impossibly high, yet Burr and Benavides managed to build a private world for themselves. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with art, laughter, and the kind of companionship that no amount of Hollywood glamour could replace. After Burr's passing in 1993, Benavides became the steward of his legacy. He took over their vineyard and continued many of the charitable projects that Burr had supported in life. When asked about Burr, Benavides rarely spoke in sensational terms. Instead, he described a man of generosity, humor, and profound loyalty. While the world saw a tough, commanding figure in Perry Mason, Benavides knew the softer, more human side. A man who enjoyed quiet evenings at home, who was fiercely protective of those he loved, and who never stopped dreaming despite the weight of secrecy. What makes this love story so powerful is that it thrived in silence. While Burr couldn't publicly declare his feelings, the life he built with Benavides spoke volumes. It was proof that even in the harshest of circumstances, love finds a way to endure. Barbara Hale recognizes and often made sure people understood that Burr's life wasn't just about hiding. It was also about loving deeply and sincerely. In the end, Burr's greatest performance wasn't on screen but off it, crafting a life where love could exist quietly, steadily, and without compromise. To truly understand why Raymond Burr lived his life the way he did, you have to look at the Hollywood system of his time. The entertainment industry in the 1950s and 1960s was not just about creating television shows and movies. It was about building myths. Studios controlled every aspect of their stars' public lives, carefully crafting images that matched what middle America wanted to see. For someone like Burr, who was both a leading man and a household name, that meant projecting a heterosexual, family-oriented persona, no matter the truth behind the curtain. Hollywood had long been a place of hidden lives. Many actors before Burr had been forced to either deny or obscure their relationships to fit into the rigid expectations of the era. Contracts often included morality clauses, which gave studios the legal power to fire actors if their personal behavior threatened the studio's reputation. Being openly gay wasn't simply frowned upon, it was a career-ending revelation. Tabloid magazines were ruthless, and any whisper of scandal could destroy not just an actor's image, but their livelihood. This was why the stories about Burr's so-called tragic marriages and invented children were manufactured. It wasn't just a personal choice to lie. It was a survival tactic. A leading man who was perceived as different could lose starring roles overnight, replaced by someone more marketable. For Burr, his longevity in Hollywood depended on his ability to play the game, and he played it well. The public saw a man who had endured heartbreak, which made him appear more relatable, more human, and most importantly, more acceptable to audiences. But the cost of this silence was high. Burr had to watch as parts of his identity were erased or rewritten for the sake of appearances. While he found comfort and love with Robert Benavides, the world was not allowed to see it. Instead, Hollywood pushed a false version of his life story, one that painted him as a solitary figure defined by loss rather than a man thriving in a long-term relationship. This pattern wasn't unique to Burr. Stars like Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, and countless others lived similar double lives, forced to smile for cameras while hiding their truths. Barbara Hale, who witnessed the system firsthand, often expressed sadness about what it took away from Burr. She admired his strength, but also understood the quiet sacrifices he made. Hale herself managed to navigate Hollywood with her dignity intact, but she never forgot how much the industry demanded of its brightest talents. Burr's silence wasn't weakness. It was a necessity, born out of the unyielding pressures of a machine that valued image over authenticity. Today, it's easy to question why stars didn't simply come out and live openly. But in Burr's time, such honesty would not have been met with applause. It would have been met with rejection and unemployment. That was the reality of Hollywood in the mid-20th century. Raymond Burr was far from the only one forced into secrecy, but his story shines as a stark reminder of how much the industry controlled, and how much it took from the people who gave it life. In her later years, Barbara Hale reflected more openly on Raymond Burr's life, and the friendship that lasted for decades. She often spoke with warmth, emphasizing that Burr was more than just the enigmatic star the world thought it knew. He was a man of deep loyalty, humor, and kindness. Hale understood better than most the heavy burden he carried, and in her reflections, she wanted people to see the fullness of who he truly was, beyond Hollywood's fabrications. Hale admired how Burr built a family of his own choosing, surrounding himself with people he loved and trusted. His long partnership with Robert Benavides, though never publicized in Burr's lifetime, was a source of happiness and stability. Burr and Benavides shared not only a romantic bond, but also a creative one. building a vineyard together and investing in projects outside of Hollywood. It was a partnership rooted in respect and longevity, one that quietly thrived while the world assumed Burr lived alone. When asked why Burr never set the record straight, Hale always reminded people that the world wasn't ready to hear the truth during his lifetime. The cost of honesty would have been unbearable, not only for Burr, but also for the people he loved. Instead, he chose privacy, preferring to protect his career and his partner rather than satisfy public curiosity. Hale never criticized him for this. She respected his choices, knowing that survival in Hollywood required difficult compromises. Hale also spoke of the profound impact Burr had on audiences. Through his roles in Perry Mason and Ironside, he became a symbol of justice, intelligence, and strength. Millions of people tuned in to watch him week after week. And to them, he was a dependable presence, someone who represented fairness in a world that often felt unjust. This connection with viewers was real, and Hale believed it was one of the reasons Burr endured as a beloved figure long after his shows ended. What struck Hale most, however, was Burr's generosity. He quietly supported countless charities, paid for children's medical expenses, and even helped struggling actors find work. Burr never sought recognition for these acts of kindness. He simply felt it was his duty to give back. Hale recalled moments when Burr would downplay his own hardships, focusing instead on how he could help others. To her, that was the essence of who he was, a man who endured personal sacrifices yet never stopped lifting up those around him. As Hale aged, she seemed to carry both pride and sadness when remembering Burr. Pride in the man he truly was, and sadness in the fact that he couldn't fully live as himself in the public eye. Still, she took comfort in knowing that times had changed, and that today his story could be told more openly, without the same fear of judgment. Raymond Burr's legacy, in Hale's eyes, wasn't defined by the secrecy he kept, but by the integrity with which he lived. He gave the world unforgettable performances, a quiet strength that inspired millions, and a reminder that true character is often found in the parts of life hidden from the spotlight.